I think it probably makes sense to be clear on your goals. I think it's a good start for anything in life to have some sort of direction. You can better map out your journey then when you know what direction you're going in. And that's certainly relevant for training. I think that at the fundamental level, the goals of most people that listen to this podcast are probably to get maybe a bit bigger, maybe a bit stronger, maybe a bit leaner, maybe a bit healthier, so that over time you're a stronger version of yourself. You're lean, but you're a bit more muscular, and you're preserving your health for the long term and the short term, in that you feel pretty good each day. There's some pretty reasonable goals, and that's what most people tend to be aiming at. And the reason I give you what most people are aiming at first is because we could go through every single goal individually and talk about the minor changes in training principles that might apply. And we will mention some of those as we go along. But for most people, what you need to do is start off and ask yourself, right, before I consider adopting a specialized training program for a specialized goal, am I taking care of the absolute basics that everyone, in my opinion, should have in place? Okay, you should be able to say yes to that first. And what that means is being somewhat in alignment with general exercise guidelines or a low tier training program across multiple domains. And what I mean by that is that you're satisfying your aerobic fitness targets or your cardiorespiratory fitness targets, and you're satisfying basic strength and hypertrophy training targets. Okay. So if you consider that and you look at, governing bodies such as the World Health Organization or the ACSM and so on, you'll see that generally what's recommended is that people are getting somewhere between 150 and 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise per week. If you're getting more vigorous intensity exercise, something like, I don't know, more intense boxing or intense running, or, you're playing an intense sport where your heart rate's getting up towards its max, you might need to do a bit less overall time because it's more intense, and that would be considered vigorous exercise. But for most people, aiming for 150 to 300 minutes of that moderate intensity cardiorespiratory exercise is what you're looking at. And that could be going for a hike, a brisk walk, depending on your level of fitness, or it could be a jog or a run or a cycle, or it could even be something like your jiu-jitsu training or football training. Again, it does depend on the intensity, and it doesn't need to be exact when you calculate that. But roughly, what you should be looking for is that you're at least meeting somewhere around that 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise per week. If you're doing more vigorous exercise, a little bit less. And that's going to take care of your basic cardiorespiratory fitness for health purposes. So if you've got that in place, then you can consider the more specialized training considerations in that domain. Similarly, for resistance training, you want to be getting at least 2 days of strength exercises for most or all body parts. Okay, so you're maybe doing 2 days where you're training 2 to 3 sets for each muscle group, close enough to failure, maybe something between 1 and 4 reps from failure. That's not necessarily specified in exercise guidelines because it's a bit more complicated for people, but that's generally what I'd consider to be a low barrier of entry for weight training. If you're getting 2 days a week, you're training relatively close to failure, a couple of sets for each muscle group, then I would consider that to be an entry point to weight training. Now, an entry point isn't necessarily going to carry us all the way forward, okay? Because when you look at those kind of two domains of cardiorespiratory versus resistance training, obviously there's more to training overall, but they're the basics. If you look at those, you can break them down into various subdomains. For example, if you're interested in the cardiorespiratory side of things, you might be looking to really maximize your aerobic fitness for long-term endurance events, for example, or long duration endurance events. Or you might be trying to maximize your anaerobic fitness, for something like repeated short bouts. For example, maybe you're an MMA fighter or a Muay Thai fighter, and you need to be able to apply maximal force or maximal effort in bursts and then be able to recover really quickly again. That might be what you're interested in. So the training prescriptions obviously begin to become more and more specialized as you go down each of those respective domains. And then as you get into specific sporting activities, which is beyond the scope of this podcast. From a resistance training perspective, for the most part, if you're entering the gym, you're doing a reasonable rep range. You're not doing just singles, or you're not doing just sets of 100. Maybe you're doing most of your sets in the 5 to 20 rep range, let's say. If you're doing that, you're training every muscle group, and you're doing that, at least twice per week, you're going to start gaining muscle and you're going to start getting stronger, but you're going to reach a plateau relatively quickly, because we don't tend to see many people having success training just twice per week, unless it's a rare circumstance where someone is very restricted for time on other days and they're willing to train for 2 or 3 hours plus on those two respective days, which is a rare instance. For the
Yeah,
most
just
part,
on that, like most people, you could say, like, say you did train for quite a while, you trained twice, 2 days per week in terms of resistance training, but we would see that more as either just entry level, so you're just, rank beginner, or you're in this kind of what we often call a maintenance phase, where you're like, I want to try to gain a little bit, get a little bit stronger, maybe gain a little bit muscle, but you're really just maintaining. You're really just maintaining the adaptations that you've already built, and you kind of need to do a little bit more than just 2 hours of resistance training per week. And like you said, that can either look like 2 to 3 hours on those 2 days, or what often happens is you just do more days per week.
yeah, absolutely. And what was I going to say there? The other instance, obviously, is if you're someone who's, been training for multiple years, and maybe you've taken up another sport. Like, I'd kind of put myself in this category where my goals are primarily related to jujitsu or grappling, but I still weight train. There's been periods of time over the last year or so where I'm only training twice per week. And I don't really expect even that level of maintenance where I'm going to be gaining slowly. I'm kind of just expecting that I'm going to maintain my muscle mass. I'm going to maintain my strength. But that's perfectly fine from a health perspective. That's something that's important to emphasize as well, is that those basic kind of thresholds for health, it's if you're have built up over a number of years to a very high level of training where you're training 5-6 days per week, you still might be able to be getting the health benefits from just training twice per week, because it's not like you need to go from a 160 bench to a 200 bench for health. There's not much to be gained beyond that point. So
You look great doing it, though.
huh?
You look great doing it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's all that matters, really, isn't it? Psychological well-being. But yeah, so that they're the kind of introductory points related to both of those respective domains of training. Now, cardio training is something we've spent a great deal of time talking about on the podcast. We did a series about cardiovascular health. We talked about cardiovascular training. So I'm not going to go into all the nuances of that here, because I think that weight training tends to be what we focus on a bit more and what our listeners tend to be interested in.
And also, just on that, cardio training is very simplified.
Very
I shouldn't say very simplistic to get right. It's like, it's hard to kind of fuck it up. The reason most people fuck it up is that they just don't do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And like that's the thing. Like, getting people to commit to cardio is very difficult, especially if it's just from a health perspective. Because, if you're trying to just maximize cardiorespiratory health long term and that's your goal, then it might literally be as simple as you doing 45 minutes of moderate intensity exercise where you're, short of breath on a stationary bike. Super boring. You're not trying to maximize performance. You're just doing that, and you're doing it 3, 4, maybe even 5 times per week. Getting people to commit to that, very difficult. 1, it's a lot of time. 2, it's boring. Okay. So that's why it's actually much easier to adhere to cardio if you're doing it as some sort of either social setting. So, for example, going hiking with friends, or if it's part of a sporting event where, like, for example, with us with jujitsu, our cardio is taken care of in jiu-jitsu, but we're not thinking of it as a cardio challenge when we're there. We're thinking of not getting strangled or strangling our friends. So that's what you're thinking about. So it's very different. And you really don't have to complicate it much more than that from a health perspective. If you can get that 150 minutes per week, you're doing a fantastic job. And the vast majority of people aren't getting as much as you. So start with that. If you can get that together for a couple of months, you can start to become a little bit more advanced with it then. I generally find that most of my clients don't end up doing that much because we end up pressed for time. So we add in, shorter intervals that are within that vigorous or high intensity end of the spectrum. So it's about what you can commit to. And if you have more specific sporting goals, again, that's a different consideration.
Yeah, and even just thinking about that, like 150 minutes, like depending on your fitness level, like that could be something as easy as a walk,
Mhm.
and like most people, they can fit in, 30 minutes of a walk per day. Like most people, their days are not so back to back that they can't fit in 30 minutes. And I don't even mean it has to be continuous 30 minutes. It could be 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. And, as a result of that, you can pretty well get close to your 150 minutes. And obviously, not every single day is going to look the same or whatever, but you can do a pretty damn good job on like very little work.
Absolutely. You certainly can. So look, take care of that, get it done, and then we'll move on to the specifics of the resistance training considerations.